So Mike, we were just talking about, how do I afford to do this and methods to defray some of the cost and be able to get contributions from state funding and those sorts of things. Now, if I decide to do this, what are my top challenges? What are the hurdles in getting to compliancy?
Yeah, I think there's a handful that we're seeing people struggle with. First is timeline and timeline management, because this process, can take a while. It's likely not going to happen overnight. We talked about the assessment being, 90 days by itself. So, not putting it off. And a lot of people, kind of burying their head in the sand, like I'll deal with it as soon as it's final, as soon as it comes out, are going to put themselves at a disadvantage because they're going to find out, the process to make this happen is going to take a while, and we can dive into that as well. But I think that's kind of step one. Step two, we hit on a little bit with the investment, with the cost. There is an investment to do this. There is significant investment in some cases to do this. And figuring out for your organization whether or not it's a good match for what your business goals are is important. And even if it is, you still have to come up with the money. And so looking at how you're going to rearrange your P&L or how you're going to generate the additional revenue by doing this that's going to help justify it is going to be an effort that's got to be taken on by the leadership of the organization and determine, all right, this is how we need to get there. And it's not insignificant. So I think that's one of those challenges. From a technical standpoint, a lot of the controls and things can be implemented fairly easily. The things like the multi-factor authentication and the DNS filtering and those kinds of things. But there are technical challenges which could be bigger. I think the migration to Microsoft GCC High is one of those. It's not a push-a-button migration that just gets done overnight, as if you were moving from one tenant to another tenant in Microsoft's commercial environment. So I think that's one that plays a part in thinking about the planning, the investment, and disruption to the business a little bit, because there's going to be some business disruption as part of that, unlike some of the other technical controls that I managed.
That whole GCC High migration, I can't even tell you how many times we went back and forth with a client just to find out, hey, have you been approved by Microsoft to become a tenant inside that government data center? It's not, I'll just log in and I'll create new tenant. What's the domain I'm using? And off to the races. You can't even get to step one until you get to step point one. And
they have to say it's okay, and they're going to do it in their sweet time.
And this client that I'm speaking of, how many submissions? 4, 5, 6 times they were submitting once a week to see if that would move the needle. And of course, as you just said, that's not going to move the needle with Microsoft. You could submit it 100 times that application, but it's not going to happen until they're ready for it to happen. So you need to factor in time for these things.
Yeah. Another challenge I think that organizations are going to face is that if they've never done cybersecurity controls in their organization before, things are going to look and feel different to their employees. They're going to have employees who never used multi-factor authentication are going to have to do that. They're going to get
employees that have never been trained before.
Employees that have never been trained before are going to have to go through that. One of the controls was about limiting access to data, and it used to be that everybody could get access to everything, but now that's all going to be split down. There's going to be some operational transition that comes along, and that's true whether or not you're going through, CMMC compliance or even just implementing a good security program. But it is going to be real for people going through this. There is going to be a little disruption through all of that.
It'll be a little pain.
And I think the last piece, and this is still a little bit of an unknown, is the audit process. The audit process is, they're building that boat as they're going down the river a little bit. Still training and certifying auditors, to be able to be ready to do all of this work that they need to do. And it's a little unclear what that process is going to look and feel like. So I think if you go through a good assessment process and a good remediation process and can really get your ducks in a row from a evidence standpoint,
Yeah,
right? The
documentation.
documentation,
Yeah.
the policies, all the things that you know the auditor is going to be looking for when it comes time for that, you can smooth that out a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Limit the scrambling.
limit the scrambling and frankly probably make the auditor's life a lot easier, which is probably going to make your life a lot easier and have that audit cost less money.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that amount of time that the auditor spends there is going to translate to real dollars spent.